The Festival of Ascendance happened only once every 5 years on Valtheris Prime, and species from across the galaxy came to show their respect to the Calthian Empire. The capital city gleamed under 3 suns, its towers of crystal and metal reaching toward the purple sky. Millions of beings packed the streets, their voices creating a sound like distant thunder. Ambassador John Hayes stood on the tribute platform with the rest of the human delegation. He had been preparing for this moment for months. Humanity was still new to the galactic community, barely 50 years since first contact. They needed to make a good impression. The Empire controlled trade routes, technology, and the laws that governed hundreds of worlds. One wrong move could isolate Earth and her colonies for generations. "Stay close," John said to his staff. He looked at Peter Cole, the engineer who had brought his family along. The ambassador had approved it. Show the aliens that humans valued family. Show them that diplomacy wasn't just about politics. Peter's daughter, Emma, was 7 years old. She wore a blue dress that her mother had made special for the trip. Her eyes were wide as she stared at the alien creatures around them. There were beings made of living crystal, others that floated on clouds of gas, some that looked like walking trees. Emma had never seen anything like it. "Dad, look at that one," Emma whispered, pointing at a sculpture that hovered in the air without any visible support. It changed colors as it spun, throwing rainbow light across the marble platform. "Stay near me, sweetie," Peter said. He held her hand tight. The platform was crowded with delegates from 40 different species, all waiting their turn to present gifts to the Emperor. The ceremony moved slowly. Each species approached the throne, bowed, and offered their tribute. The Velkin brought rare minerals. The Torathi offered artwork carved from bone. When humanity's turn came, John Hayes stepped forward with a sealed container holding samples of Earth's music, literature, and art. Digital files representing thousands of years of human culture. The Emperor barely looked at it. A servant took the container and placed it with dozens of others. The Emperor waved his hand in dismissal. The human delegation was supposed to move to the side and wait for the closing blessing. Emma had let go of her father's hand. She wandered toward the edge of the platform, drawn by that floating sculpture. It was so pretty, changing from blue to green to gold. She wanted to see it up close. The platform was 3 stories high, elevated so that the crowds below could see the ceremony. Safety barriers made of energy fields usually lined the edges. Usually. But the festival had strained the city's power grid. Minor systems were failing across the capital. No one had noticed that the barriers on the eastern edge of the platform had shut down. Emma reached out toward the sculpture. Her foot touched the edge of the platform where the barrier should have been. There was nothing there. She lost her balance. She fell. The scream came from Lisa Warren, the human communications officer. She saw Emma go over the edge. The sound cut through the ceremonial music like a knife. Peter Cole turned and saw empty space where his daughter had been standing. His brain couldn't process it at first. And he was running, shoving past alien dignitaries, their formal robes and ceremonial armor meaning nothing to him. He reached the edge and looked down. Emma lay on the marble plaza below. She wasn't moving. Blood pooled around her small body. 3 stories? No child could survive that fall. Peter tried to jump down after her. John Hayes and Danny Martinez grabbed him, held him back. Peter was screaming his daughter's name over and over. "Let me go, Emma, Emma." John Hayes turned to the nearest Imperial Guard. "Get medical help. Now. A child is hurt." The guard, a Calthian warrior in ceremonial armor, didn't move. The plaza is sacred ground during the ceremony. No one may approach without authorization. "A child is dying," John's voice broke. He had daughters of his own back on Earth. "Protocol must be observed," the guard said. His face showed no emotion. Below, Emma made a small movement. Her hand twitched. She was still alive. Peter broke free and ran for the stairs leading down from the platform. 2 more guards blocked his way. They crossed their energy spears. "Please," Peter begged. "That's my daughter. She needs help. We have sent word to the ceremonial coordinator. They will determine the appropriate response." Minutes passed. The ceremony had stopped. Thousands of beings watched in silence. The other human delegates tried to push past the guards. They were all stopped. Lisa Warren was on her communication device frantically calling for human medical personnel, but they were back at the landing zone 20 minutes away. On the plaza below, Emma coughed. Blood came from her mouth. Her eyes opened for a moment, searching for her father. She was scared. She was in pain. She was 7 years old and dying alone on an alien world while beings with the power to help her did nothing. John Hayes grabbed a Calthian official by his robes. "Do something." "She's a child." The official pulled away, smoothing his garments. "The ceremonial coordinator is consulting with the legal department about jurisdiction. The plaza falls under temple authority during the festival. We must determine who has the right to authorize medical intervention. She'll be dead before you finish talking. These protocols exist for a reason, human. We cannot simply ignore thousands of years of tradition. Danny Martinez found a human doctor in the delegation. Dr. William Foster pushed his way to the edge with his medical kit. The guard stopped him too. I'm a physician. Let me down there. No one enters the plaza without authorization. 27 minutes after Emma fell, a Calthene medical team finally arrived. They moved slowly, with ceremonial precision. They examined Emma's body. One of them looked up at the platform and made a gesture. Peter Cole's legs gave out. John Hayes caught him. The engineer made a sound that wasn't quite human, a noise of pure grief that made even some of the alien delegates step back. Emma Cole had died 14 minutes earlier while bureaucrats debated protocol. The cameras that broadcast the ceremony across the galaxy had captured everything. The footage reached Earth in less than an hour. The message traveled faster than light through the relay network that connected the galaxy. What humanity saw made something fundamental shift in their collective consciousness. News networks played the video on repeat. A little girl in a blue dress reaching for something beautiful. The fall. Her father being held back by alien guards while his daughter died on cold marble. The calm, indifferent faces of the Calthene officials as they discussed procedure. 27 minutes of a child suffering while bureaucrats talked. In homes across Earth and her colonies, people watched and felt something break inside them. Parents held their children closer. Old veterans who had sworn they were done with fighting felt their hands curl into fists. Young people who had never thought about military service started looking up recruitment centers. President Helen Morris appeared on every screen 48 hours after the incident. Her face was composed, but her eyes were red. She had watched the footage a dozen times, and each viewing made her angrier. "My fellow humans," she began. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the rage underneath. "We have witnessed a tragedy that should never have happened." Emma Cole was 7 years old. She died not from the fall, but from callous indifference. She died because the Calthene Empire values protocol over life. She paused, her jaw tight. "We will seek justice through diplomatic channels. We will demand accountability. We will ensure that Emma's death was not meaningless. But make no mistake, we will have answers. We will have justice. One way or another." The speech was calm and measured. It called for patience and diplomacy. But humans heard what wasn't being said. They heard the promise underneath the careful words. In a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Frank Bishop met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They had been called together within hours of Emma's death. President Morris had given them a single order in private: prepare for everything. "We don't know if it will come to war," Frank said, looking at the faces around the table. "But if it does, we need to be ready. The Empire has 1,000 worlds. They have technology we barely understand. They have been the dominant power for 3,000 years. They also think we're harmless," said Admiral Richard Stone, commander of the Space Fleet. "They let us join the galactic community because they thought we were civilized, manageable. Then we show them what humans do when pushed too far," Frank replied. "Start pulling every ship back to defensive positions. I want war games running constantly. And get me a list of every piece of civilian technology we have that can be weaponized." Across human space, things began to move. Quietly at first. The carrier Independence, under Captain Nicole Rogers, suddenly shifted from its patrol route. The crew wasn't told why. They just ran drill after drill, combat scenarios that grew more intense each day. Nicole walked through her ship and saw the change in her people. They had all seen the footage, every single one of them. The youngest crew member was 19. Emma Cole would have been his age in 12 years. Would have been. Past tense. That was what burned in everyone's mind. On New Terra, the largest human colony outside the Sol system, Kevin Torres sat in his apartment and watched the footage for the 20th time. He was 42 years old. He had served 10 years in the Marines before retiring to become a teacher. He had a wife and 2 kids. He had sworn he was done with war. He watched Emma's hand reach for her father while guards held Peter Cole back. He watched her die alone. Kevin stood up and walked to his closet. In the back, wrapped in plastic, was his old uniform. He pulled it out. The next morning, he went to the recruitment center. The line stretched around the block. People from 18 to 60, all coming back or signing up for the first time. The recruiter looked overwhelmed. "I need to re-enlist," Kevin said when his turn came. The recruiter didn't ask why. He just nodded and pulled up the forms. Everyone knew why. Meanwhile, the Calthene Empire conducted its investigation. 3 weeks after Emma's death, they released their official findings. The barrier failure was due to a power fluctuation. No one was at fault. These things happened. However, in recognition of the tragedy, the Empire would pay the Cole family 50,000 credits and ensure better maintenance of safety systems in the future. They sent the report to Earth expecting gratitude. They expected humanity to accept this generous response and move forward. After all, this was more than they had offered most species. The Velkin had lost children to Imperial negligence dozens of times and had accepted far less. The response from Earth was silence. Days of absolute silence. Then the requests started coming through diplomatic channels. Humanity wanted educational materials about the Empire, cultural information, maps of Imperial territory for their archives, economic data, military traditions and history. They claimed it was to better understand their place in galactic civilization. The Empire, confident in their superiority, provided most of it. Why not? Let the humans learn about the power they served. Let them understand the glory of the Empire. Maybe it would make them more compliant. In a secret facility on the moon, Rachel Kim led a team of engineers working 18-hour days. She was looking at the fusion reactor that powered colony ships. Clean energy, the pride of human engineering. She was figuring out how to turn it into a bomb. If we remove the safety limiters and reverse the magnetic containment, she explained to her team, we can create an explosion equivalent to a nuclear weapon. Every colony ship becomes a potential weapon. Across the room, physicist James Chen was working on mining lasers. The massive drills used to cut through asteroids could be modified. With a few changes to the focusing array, they could punch through ship armor. Everything humanity had built for peace was being converted for war. The Empire had no idea. In the Cole family home in Seattle, Peter sat in Emma's room. Her toys were still scattered on the floor. Her books were stacked by the bed. Helen Morris had visited him personally. She told him that Emma would be remembered, that her death would mean something. Peter looked at the credit transfer the Empire had sent. 50,000 credits, the price they had put on his daughter's life. He deleted it without accepting. Then he sent a message to the president. Just 3 words. Burn it all. 6 months after Emma Cole's death, humanity sent their formal response to the Calthene Empire. Ambassador John Hayes, who had been recalled to Earth, was not the one to deliver it. Instead, a new representative named Catherine Bell stood before the Imperial Council on Valtheris Prime. The human government demands that Emperor Krauth the Eternal stand trial for negligent homicide in the death of Emma Cole, Catherine said. Her voice was clear and firm. We demand he answer for his government's actions that led to a child's death. The council chamber fell silent. Then the Calthene officials began to laugh. It started with one, then spread to the others. The idea was absurd, ridiculous. The Emperor was immortal, divine, beyond the judgment of lesser beings. And here were these newcomers, these humans who had been part of the galactic community for barely a breath, demanding he stand trial. Your request is denied, the head counselor said, still smiling. Return to your world and accept the Empire's generous settlement. This matter is closed. Catherine looked at each of them. Then we are done talking. She walked out of the council chamber. Behind her, the Calthene officials continued laughing. They sent word to the frontier fleets. Teach these humans a lesson. Show them what happens to species who forget their place. 3 Imperial battleships arrived at the human colony of Arcturus Station 2 weeks later. It was a small outpost, home to 50,000 people. Mostly families of miners and researchers. The perfect target to make an example. Admiral Cranthor commanded the fleet from his flagship. He sent a message to the station. Surrender immediately. Accept Imperial authority. This was standard procedure. Every species surrendered when they saw the might of the Empire. The response came from Commander Steve Phillips. Negative. Leave our space or we will open fire. Cranthor actually laughed. The station had perhaps 10 defensive ships. Small patrol craft. His 3 battleships could reduce the station to dust. You have 1 hour to evacuate civilians and surrender your military personnel. Steve looked at his crew. They were afraid. Of course they were. But they had all volunteered to stay when the evacuation order came through. Most of the civilians were already gone. Everyone who remained knew what was coming. Load everything we have, Steve said quietly. Prepare the surprise. When the hour ended, the Imperial fleet advanced. They expected the human ships to either flee or die quickly. Instead, the human vessels spread out in a strange pattern. Then they fired. The weapons weren't standard ship cannons. They were mining lasers, modified and overcharged. They cut through the shields of the nearest battleship like it was paper. Before the Calthene could react, small objects launched from the human ships, hundreds of them. Debris, the sensor officer on Krenthor's ship reported. They're launching garbage at us. Except it wasn't garbage. Each piece was a modified fusion reactor core from dismantled mining equipment. Remote detonated. Nuclear yield. The explosions tore through the Imperial formation. One battleship lost its entire port side. Another had its engines crippled. Krenthor stared at his screens in shock. This wasn't how civilized species fought. This was barbaric. Then the human ships rammed them. Steve Phillips aimed his ship directly at the damaged battleship and pushed the engines to maximum. His crew had already evacuated to the escape pods. He was alone on the bridge. He thought about Emma Cole as his ship punched through the battleship's weakened shields and buried itself in the reactor section. The explosion could be seen from Arcturus Station. The battleship broke in half. The remaining 2 Imperial ships retreated, damaged and confused. They had lost a third of their force to an enemy that should have been helpless. Krenthor sent his report back to the Empire. He expected sympathy, reinforcements. Instead, he received a response from Captain Linda Walsh. She commanded the human fleet that had been waiting just outside sensor range. 30 ships, armed with every desperate weapon humanity could devise. The message was simple. She played the footage of Emma Cole dying, all 27 minutes. Then she added coordinates. This is where we'll be tomorrow. Come and try again. The war had begun. Across Imperial space, human forces struck at supply depots and outposts. They ignored every rule of civilized warfare. They used suicide drones. They hid bombs in cargo containers. They sent false surrender signals and then attacked when Imperial ships came close. Colonel Marcus Wright led ground forces on the Imperial supply world of Terran IV. His Marines hit the depot at night, moving fast and brutal. The Calthene garrison surrendered after an hour, expecting to be taken prisoner as galactic law required. Marcus looked at the commander. Did you know about Emma Cole? The Calthene officer nodded. Of course, the child who fell. Unfortunate accident. You call it unfortunate. We call it murder. Marcus turned to his troops. No prisoners. Not yet. Not until they understand. The Calthene garrison died that night. The news spread across the Empire like fire. Humans didn't take prisoners. Humans didn't follow the rules. They fought like animals. Other species began to pay attention. The Torathi remembered when their children had died in Imperial factories. The Velkin remembered when their protests were met with violence. Suddenly, humanity's rage didn't seem excessive. It seemed overdue. News reporter Amy Foster embedded with Marine units and sent footage back to Earth. She showed soldiers who cried at night but fought without mercy during the day. She interviewed young troops who had enlisted the day Emma died. They all said the same thing. This wasn't about conquest. This was about making sure no one ever again watched a child die while officials debated protocol. The Empire tried to rally their subject species. They called humanity monsters, barbarians, uncivilized killers who threatened the galactic order. The response was unexpected. The Torathi refused to send troops. We will not fight for an empire that values procedure over life, their leader announced. The Velkin declared neutrality. Other species began asking questions they had been afraid to ask for centuries. If the Empire could let a human child die and feel no guilt, what had they done to others? Months turned into a year. Humanity lost ships and soldiers by the thousands. But they kept coming. Every defeat made them angrier. Every victory was marked with a memorial to Emma Cole, a reminder of why they fought. The Empire began to realize they had made a terrible mistake. They had dismissed humanity as small and weak. They had thought the death of one child was trivial. They had laughed when humans demanded justice. They weren't laughing anymore. 2 years into the war, the mathematics had shifted. Humanity had lost nearly a quarter of their fleet and over 100,000 soldiers. But the Calthene Empire had lost something more important. They had lost the appearance of invincibility. Admiral Chris Bennett studied the star charts in his ready room aboard the carrier Defiance. His target was Kalen's Gate, a strategic passage that controlled access to 12 Imperial systems. The Empire had positioned their largest remaining armada there. Over 200 ships, including 15 dreadnoughts. Intelligence said they were preparing for a final push to Earth. Chris had 40 ships. On paper, it was suicide. But humanity had stopped caring about paper 18 months ago. The star is dying, his science officer, Lieutenant Greg Mason, explained. It's collapsing into a neutron star. Won't happen for another 50 years, but the gravity well is already unstable. Chris looked at the data. An idea formed. A terrible, beautiful idea. How close can we get before the gravity tears us apart? Greg ran the numbers. Closer than those Imperial dreadnoughts can. They're too big, too heavy. They'd be ripped apart by the tidal forces. But our ships are smaller, and we can push our engines harder than they think is safe. Greg understood. His face went pale. Sir, even if this works, we might not survive the escape. Then we better make it count. Chris called his captains. Gave them the option to refuse. None did. The human fleet entered Kalen's Gate like they were retreating. The Imperial Armada pursued, confident in their numbers. Admiral Vrentok commanded the Empire's forces. He had studied the humans. They fought dirty, yes, but they always retreated when truly outnumbered. This would be the battle that broke them. The human fleet dove toward the dying star. The Imperials followed, eager to finish them. They didn't notice how close they were getting until the gravity warnings started screaming. Pull back, Vrentok ordered. Too late. The massive dreadnoughts couldn't escape the gravity well. They tried to turn, but the tidal forces grabbed them. Metal screamed. Ships designed to withstand weapons fire couldn't handle the raw power of a collapsing star. Chris pushed his fleet even closer, using the gravity to slingshot around the star. The maneuver was insane. 3 human ships broke apart from the stress, but the rest made it through, accelerating to impossible speeds. Behind them, the Imperial Armada tore itself apart. 50 ships gone in minutes. The dreadnoughts crumbled like paper. Vrentok died screaming as his flagship was pulled into pieces. The human fleet shot out of Kalen's Gate and into Imperial territory. Chris had lost 7 ships. The Empire had lost 50. The passage was open. News of the victory spread. But more important than the tactical win was what it represented. Humanity had outthought the Empire. They had used physics itself as a weapon. They weren't just angry barbarians. They were brilliant, ruthless, and willing to risk everything. The subject species of the Empire began to move. On the Tarathi homeworld, resistance fighters had been planning for decades, but never had the courage to act. Human operative Jennifer Stone made contact with their leaders in secret. We can provide weapons, she told them in a hidden basement. Training, support. But you have to be willing to fight. The Tarathi leader looked at her. Why would you help us? We are not human. Jennifer pulled up a picture on her display. Emma Cole, smiling in her blue dress. Because a child died and no one helped her. We won't let that happen to anyone else. Not human, not Tarathi, not anyone. 3 days later, the Tarathi rose up. They hit Imperial installations across their world. Human advisors helped them strike at the right targets. Within a week, the Tarathi homeworld was free for the first time in 800 years. The Velkin followed. Then the Narish. Then species humanity had never even heard of. The Empire's domain began to fracture. Rebellion spread like wildfire. On Velthera's prime, the Imperial leadership tore itself apart. Some wanted to negotiate with humanity. Others demanded the use of planet-killer weapons, ancient devices locked away for millennia. Others argued that would turn every species in the galaxy against them. While they debated, humanity made their move. Sergeant Paul Anderson led his battalion in the liberation of the Velkin capital. They hit the ground in the middle of the night, moving through streets where Velkin civilians came out to help them. An old Velkin woman gave Paul directions to the Imperial garrison. A young Velkin man showed them where the commanders lived. The battle lasted 48 hours. When it ended, the Velkin flag flew over their own capital for the first time in 3 centuries. Paul watched it rise and thought about Emma. One child's death had freed billions. It didn't make it right. It didn't bring her back. But it meant something. 6 months later, Commander Ryan Clark received his orders directly from President Morris. Go to Velthera's Prime. End this. Ryan's strike force was small. Just 15 ships. But they were the best humanity had. The fastest, the deadest, crewed by veterans who had been fighting since the war began. They jumped into the Velthera system expecting massive resistance. Instead, they found chaos. Half the system defense fleet had mutinied. Subject species crews refused to fight for the Empire anymore. The path to the capital world was wide open. Ryan took it. They landed in the same plaza where Emma had died. The marble was still stained. No one had cleaned it. The Empire had left it as it was, thinking humans would eventually forget. Marines poured out of the landing craft. Among them was Private Danny Torres, Kevin's son. He had turned 18 2 months after the war started and enlisted the same day. Now he was here, in the place where it all began. The Imperial Palace Guard tried to resist. They died quickly. Human soldiers moved through the ancient halls with cold efficiency. They had done this 100 times now on 100 worlds. Palace, fortress, bunker. It didn't matter. Humanity found you. Emperor Krauth the Eternal sat on his throne when they burst in. He was 300 years old, ruler of 1,000 worlds. He looked at the human soldiers and felt fear for the first time in centuries. Ryan walked up to him. Emperor Krauth, you are under arrest for negligent homicide and crimes against sentient beings. You cannot do this, Krauth said. His voice shook. I am immortal. I am beyond your laws. Then you're about to learn that immortal doesn't mean unkillable. Ryan nodded to his troops. They pulled the Emperor from his throne and dragged him out of the palace. They brought Emperor Krauth to the plaza in chains, the same plaza where Emma Cole had fallen, the same marble that still held the faint outline of where she had lain bleeding while his officials debated protocol. Cameras from 100 worlds recorded everything. The Emperor was forced to stand on the exact spot where Emma had died. Lieutenant Sophie Hayes, John Hayes' niece who had joined the military the day after her uncle returned from Veltheris Prime, read the charges. Her voice carried across the silent crowd. Emperor Krauth, you are charged with negligent homicide in the death of Emma Cole, age 7. You are charged with maintaining a system that valued procedure over life. You are charged with 3,000 years of oppression against sentient beings across the galaxy. Krauth looked around at the faces watching him. Humans, yes, but also Torothi, Velkin, Narish, and dozens of other species, former subjects of his empire. They all stared at him with the same expression. Not hatred, something colder. How do you plead? Sophie asked. I am Emperor, Krauth said weakly. You have no authority over me. Wrong answer. Sophie stepped back. A human judge, brought specifically for this moment, stepped forward. The trial lasted 3 hours. Evidence was presented. The footage of Emma's death played again. Testimonies from other species about similar incidents. Children lost. Lives dismissed. All in the name of protocol and imperial dignity. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was death. They executed him at sunset. No ceremony. No grand spectacle. Just a simple bullet, human style. Quick and final. The Emperor who had ruled for 3 centuries died in seconds on the same ground where a 7-year-old girl had suffered for 27 minutes. His body was left there for 1 hour. Then it was removed and cremated. His ashes were scattered in space. No tomb. No monument. Nothing to remember him by except the records of his crimes. The Calthene Empire officially dissolved 3 days later. The remaining Imperial Council surrendered to the Free Worlds Coalition, a new government formed by humanity and the liberated species. Every species had equal representation. Every voice mattered equally. No emperors, no supreme rulers. Just cooperation and mutual respect. President Helen Morris addressed the galaxy from Earth. We did not seek this war. We did not want to become conquerors. But we will not apologize for our response. When a child dies and those with power do nothing, that power must be challenged. That power must fall. She paused, looking directly into the camera. We offer every species a choice. Join us in building something better, or go your own way in peace. We will never force anyone to kneel. We will never value protocol over life, and we will never forget why we fought. The response was overwhelming. 70 species joined the Free Worlds Coalition in the first month. Others remained independent but friendly. A few, traumatized by the brutality they had witnessed, kept their distance. Humanity accepted all of it. They had made their point. Peter Cole returned to Veltheris Prime 1 year after the war ended. He had not been back since the day Emma died. The plaza had changed. Where the stains had been, where his daughter had lain dying, there now stood a monument. It was a statue of Emma, bronze and beautiful. She was reaching upward, her hand extended toward the sky. Around the base were carved the names of every being who had died under imperial cruelty across 3,000 years. Millions of names. Children mostly. The forgotten victims of bureaucracy and indifference. Peter stood before the statue for a long time. His wife Karen stood beside him, her hand in his. They had divorced 6 months after Emma's death, the grief too much to bear together. But they had found their way back to each other during the war. Shared pain had eventually become shared healing. She would have been 9 now. Karen whispered, I know. Peter touched the statue's base. Do you think she would understand? All the death we caused? I think she would understand that her death meant something. That it changed everything. Karen looked at the names carved in the stone. All these others, they died and nothing changed. Emma died, and the galaxy rose up. Ambassador John Hayes, old now and tired, gave a speech at the monument's dedication. Beings from across the galaxy gathered to hear him. He was retired from diplomacy but had agreed to speak this one last time. "I watched Emma Cole die," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "I begged for help and was told to wait. I saw a father held back from his dying child by guards following orders. In that moment, I understood that some systems are too broken to fix. They must be torn down and rebuilt from nothing." He looked at the statue. "Humanity did not fight for revenge. We fought because we realized that if we accepted Emma's death, if we moved on and forgot, then every child in the galaxy was at risk. Every innocent being was subject to the whims of power without conscience." The crowd was silent. John continued, "We are not perfect. We made mistakes. We were brutal in ways that still haunt us. But we were right to fight. And we were right to burn down an empire that treated a child's death as an administrative inconvenience. The Free Worlds Council established protocols based on Emma's law, as it came to be known. Any threat to a child, any species, any world, was to be met with immediate action. No debates, no jurisdictional questions, life first, protocol second. Always. General Frank Bishop, now leading the peacekeeping forces that maintained order across the former Imperial territory, visited schools on liberated worlds. He told children about Emma, about why humanity had fought, about why they must never let power become more important than people. A young Torothy child asked him once, "Was it worth it? All the fighting?" Frank thought about the 100,000 humans who had died, the millions of others who had been caught in the war, the destruction and pain. Then he looked at the Torothy child, alive and free, asking questions in safety. "Yes," he said, "it was worth it. On Earth, in a cemetery in Colorado, Emma Cole's grave received visitors every day. Veterans came to salute, children left flowers. Teachers brought their classes to learn the story. The plaque on her headstone had been replaced with something larger. Emma Cole, born 2018, died 2025. Her fall was not in vain. She reminded us what we stood for. She reminded us what we would sacrifice to protect the innocent. She reminded us that some lines can never be crossed. The galaxy is free because she mattered." News reporter Eric Wright interviewed General Bishop for the 5th anniversary of the war's end. "Do you think humanity overreacted?" he asked. Frank looked at him steadily. "A child fell and died while people who could have helped her chose not to. They chose protocol over life. They chose convenience over compassion. No, we did not overreact. We reacted exactly as any species should when confronted with that level of callousness. We made sure it could never happen again." The interview ended with Frank's final statement, words that became the motto of the Free Worlds Coalition. They thought we would accept their apology and move on. They didn't understand that when you let a child die while debating protocol, you don't just insult that child's family. You insult everything that makes us human. And we will die before we let that stand. The galaxy learned what humanity meant. Not just humans, but any being who valued life over power. The Empire had fallen. Something better had risen in its place. And at the center of it all was the memory of a 7-year-old girl in a blue dress, reaching for something beautiful, reminding the universe that every life matters, that some things are worth fighting for, that some things are worth burning empires for. Emma Cole's legacy was a free galaxy. It was enough.